I'm Emma Davis, a 29-year-old who owns $980,000. House my grandmother left me was meant to be a haven for me, but instead it served as the backdrop for the most agonizing. My father betrayed me by failing to end the call that day. She's just a burden, he remarked to my mom, without realizing that I heard everything they had to say. Europe on my dime as they planned to steal my home, therefore I decided when they returned with a smile and mementos, but their key no longer suited the lock. My note simply said, "Surprise, a burden did this." The house was empty. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments section, then hit like and subscribe to discuss how it all happened. Especially if you've ever had to defend yourself against relatives who didn't like you as a child. Money was always. My parents, Robert and Diana Davis, were hardworking and had several occupations. Dad worked in a factory merely to maintain our modest rental house and provide for our family. Worker who was often complaining about lost possibilities while his mother balanced working as a part-time receptionist. Positions, even though they were struggling financially, they never failed to remind me that every dollar they spent on me was a dollar. My grandma Elizabeth was unique in that they were unable to spend money on herself. Grandma Elizabeth recognized potential in me, but my parents only saw my limitations. After my grandfather passed away at a young age, Mom was a shrewd entrepreneur who created her own real estate empire from the ground up. When we spent weekends at her lovely colonial house, Emma would tell me, "Never allow anyone tell you how valuable you are, you must choose that for yourself." For me, spending those weekends with Grandma was an escape. The house was large, with lovely antiques and a cozy backyard garden. Grandma's place, where we would plant flowers together, became my haven from the tense atmosphere at my parents' house. Grandma assisted me in applying to colleges when I became 18, which made me feel liberated. My parents thought that going to college would be a show, but they refused to pay for any of the loans and scholarships. My father would say, "College is for people who think they're better than everyone else," but I later found out that I worked 3 jobs throughout college, earning a business degree, but I was never accepted myself. Grandma was ecstatic when I graduated and got a job at a real estate company right away, but my parents grumbled about the parking situation before Grandma Elizabeth's death on the day that everything changed. I was crushed when she unexpectedly passed away at the age of 25 from a heart attack. She had been my everyone was stunned when her will was read, with the exception of Champion, my safe place. Maybe I was the one who told her lawyer that she had left her home at 1842 Magnolia to me rather than my parents. I left my granddaughter Emma Davis a drive worth about $850,000. Who has demonstrated the will and accountability to recognize its worth, the attorney read as my parents. Darkened, the will was clear, and I owned the entire property with no circumstances or co-ownership. My parents received a small amount of money, which, as soon as the deed passed into my name, they promptly spent on a new automobile and other gadgets. Instead of calling it Emma's house, the parents started calling it the family home. What began as sporadic remarks about when we should remodel the kitchen eventually turned into a complete makeover. Plans created without consulting me, and as I paid all of the bills, taxes, and repair expenses, we should. My mother would exclaim, "Really replace these countertops," as she ran her palm over the granite I had just paid to have installed. Dislike the pink hue in the living room, my father would declare, utterly ignoring the fact that I had meticulously. Despite my increasing success as a realtor, I chose it to go with my new furniture. My folks treated me like a teenager playing home when I was earning a nice 6-figure income. Would try to set limits, they would always react in the same way. Families lack limits, but after around 3 years, such boundaries only seem to work in one direction. After years of this arrangement, my parents declared that they were organizing a 3-month trip to Europe, something they'd always wanted to do, but they kept us in the dark about how they planned to pay for it. We may use the equity in the one Sunday dinner, my father dropped the word house in passing. "You mean my house?" I questioned. Avoid being self-centered and strive to keep my voice low at the house that is only in my name. "It's the family home, Emma," my mother added. "Your grandmother would have wanted us all to benefit from it, but I refused to obtain a home equity loan to fund their trip, although I did err by agreeing to assist them with some of the costs since I knew they couldn't afford it. Otherwise, I would have to pay for almost the whole vacation. Flights, lodging, and spending money while they grumbled about the day before they departed for their extensive European tour. The hotels I reserved weren't sufficiently strategically located. Heard my mom talking to her sister on the phone. Emma is paying, of course, as it's the least she can do given that we let me keep my own house, which my grandmother specifically left me, and let her keep the house. I knew what the warning sign was, but I still fervently desired their acceptance. If only I had known. It was a Tuesday afternoon in June when I may have changed the locks before they departed for Paris. My parents had been in Europe for roughly 6 weeks when everything changed, and they were now enjoying Paris. I was at home after spending the entire morning seeing properties when I realized that the social media posts. Since they would be back in a few weeks, I made the decision to get the kitchen sink that had been leaking before they departed. I had to ask my father where he had the warranty details for the faucet he had installed the previous year. I called him about the few house renovations he had really finished himself. Foreign number, and waited through the sequence of beeps and clicks that indicated the connection was made abroad. The connection was a little slow, and my father's voice seemed distant. "Hey Dad. Just wondering if you recall where you put the documentation for the kitchen faucet warranty because it's beginning to leak." Groaned deeply into the phone, which is located in the den's second drawer under the kitchen filing cabinet. "Why can't this wait?" I clarified that water is now destroying the cabinet underneath the sink, so until we return, I'm trying to keep the... My voice is irritated. I should just phone the business to check if it's covered. Fine, mumbled. "Your mother and I are off to a lovely restaurant for dinner." I asked, attempting to be kind, "How's Paris? Near the Eiffel Tower sounds fantastic." Despite his ostentatious demeanor, he curtly said, "Look, I have to go. Thank you for the information, and I hope you enjoy your dinner. We'll talk later." There was some rustling, and then I heard my father put the phone in his pocket, but he hadn't hung up correctly. I was about to hang up the phone when I heard his voice, which was muted but still audible. Emma was complaining about something in the house again, but my father's voice was now more distinct. "Who is that?" My mother's voice. My mother sounded irritated, as though he had removed the phone from his pocket but believed the call was over. I swear that she only finds issues with that house, so I should have hung up when she mentioned something about the kitchen sink. Should have hung up, but I couldn't push the end call button because of something that kept my finger hanging over it. "Comprehend the reasons behind your mother's initial departure from that house," my mother said. "Since we are her parents, it should had gone well with us. When we return, we must have a serious discussion." Regarding our retirement, my father stated that Emma must realize that our home is our future security. I felt my stomach drop. They were organizing something, and she has been a burden ever since. My father kept talking loudly. To pay for all of her educational expenditures throughout the years, so she now has this. She believes she deserves the valuable property that was just placed in her lap. What has she ever done to deserve it? My mother concurred that she has always been self-centered, but it sounded like a gunshot in my mind. She is also readily swayed. For example, she agreed to cover the majority of this trip's costs when I just mentioned family duty a few times. They chuckled in unison, making a sound I'd heard all my life, but now it felt. My father went on, sinister, "We just need to keep working on her. Her weakness is that she will either sign the house over to us or at the very least include us in the deed." I was unable to breathe since my hand was shaking, indicating that she still wants our acceptance. I was so close to dropping the phone that I fumbled with my other cell phone and started recording the... "What if she doesn't agree?" my mother inquired throughout the chat. "She will, Emma has always been desperate for our approval. We just need to make her feel guilty enough," the father asserted. "Remind her of everything we've given up. If that doesn't work, we begin discussing nursing homes and healthcare costs. Believe me, that house will be in our names by this time next year, and if all goes wrong. In the worst-case scenario," my mother continued, "we live there nevertheless, and possession is 9 out of 10. I felt that she would never evict her own parents because of the law. They both laughed again. "Very ill," and my father went on to say, "When we return, It's absurd that she has the largest room when she rarely uses it, so I believe we should take the master bedroom." My mother responded that it would be a good idea to discuss the vacation property she has been eyeing because of work. Very unnecessary expenditure. If she had more money, she ought to be supporting us more. Why should we struggle? She owes us the discourse while she's constructing her real estate empire. Continued as they reportedly discussed methods to trick me into giving them more as they made their way to the restaurant. I sat still in my chair with tears flowing down my face because money had more influence over my life. My face as all of my preconceived notions about my family disintegrated around me after roughly After 15 minutes, the connection finally failed, and I sat quietly on the phone. I'm still holding on to the house I've worked so hard to keep up. I had opened the house to my parents out of duty and affection, and my grandmother had committed it to me. They regarded it as I was merely a burden and a means to an end, and they were entitled to nothing more. Something shattered inside of me at that time, and I needed someone to manipulate and use. However, something else replaced it. I looked about my house and saw that it was harder, colder, and more determined. Showed them how they had progressively taken possession of my father's recliner for the first time. My mother's ornamental plates, which take the place of my own artwork in the living room. Items that were gradually moved into my space in what was intended to be my own house. I brushed away my tears, inhaled deeply, and decided whether or not I was a burden. Maybe it was time to take that burden off their shoulders once and for all, so I called Anil to work for the following 3. There were days when I couldn't face clients or coworkers because of the internal fury that raged every time I played back I had an intense mental dialogue and alternated between icy rage and heartbreaking grief. After the initial shock subsided, might the people who were meant to love me without conditions view me as merely a resource to be used up? My realtor instinct took over. I required options for knowledge and a well-thought-out approach. Making snap decisions was not how my grandma achieved her success, and I wouldn't make the same mistake. Spoke to family law lawyer Patricia Winters, with whom I had collaborated on multiple real estate deals. I described my being cautious to maintain the truth. The house is fully in my name. Concluded, but do they have any legal claim to it given that they have been residing there for nearly 4 years? Patricia was direct and efficient, which, based on what you've explained, was precisely what I needed. No, common law ownership would not apply in this case. You have paid all taxes and maintained the property costs, and above all, you have a clear title. Just because you let your parents live there doesn't mean that them any ownership rights? Does it matter legally, not in terms of property, that they are my parents? Right, she told me that since you are an adult, you are not required by law to live with your parents. You can sell the house. Renting or doing anything you want made me feel at least a little lighter. Legally, I was in good standing. I inquired about their possessions, which is a little trickier. Patricia acknowledged that you are required by law to give reasonable notice and chance for them to gather their personal belongings. I would advise meticulously recording everything and possibly placing. I thanked her, took thorough notes, and put their possessions in storage where they could be accessed. My thoughts were immediately racing. I then reached out to my colleague Marcus Wilson, who is among the best. Our company's performing realtors were experts in discreet, speedy sales for estate liquidations and divorces. I need to sell my house fast, quietly, and for the least amount of money possible. When we got coffee the following morning, I informed him of the market value as much as feasible. Marcus arched an eyebrow as he fled from Emma, the poor joke that didn't work. Despite my solemn demeanor, I stated, I just need things handled with complete discretion, no open listings, no signage in the yard, and if at all feasible, no public listings. Houses, and I have 6 weeks to do it. Marcus whistled softly, which is hostile. For that kind of schedule, you're looking at taking a knock on the price even in current market. I know. What kind of hit are we talking about? We spoke about how much my grandmother's house has grown since when it was inherited. Its market value is approximately $980,000. However, I might have to take more like $900,000 given the accelerated timetable and private sale. I said, I'm calculating quickly. How soon can you start showing it? I have a few pre-qualified buyers. I can live with that. Searching for a property in this neighborhood that is just like this, I could schedule private showings by next week. Ideal. I'll need the house to be vacant for exhibits that afternoon, so I made a thorough spreadsheet that properly categorizes everything in the house. Things my parents had given me, things I had bought, and things my grandma had left me. Had brought objects of dubious ownership for the final category, and I was brutally honest if I put it in my parents' column because I wanted to avoid any ethical or legal ambiguities when I couldn't prove something was mine. That would later turn against me, and then there was the logistical planning. I need temporary housing, movers for my possessions, and storage for my parents' belongings, new phone numbers, and bank accounts at several organizations. Number, a fresh email address, and a dappering strategy. I launched a new business after finding a furnished short-term property in a city around 2 hours away. I made a new email account, bought a new phone with a new number, and opened accounts at a bank my parents had never used. That was difficult to anticipate, so I carefully collected all of my vital records, including my birth certificate, social, investment accounts, passports, insurance policies, security cards, and particularly my grandmother's will and the house deed, and I kept them safe in a deposit box at my new bank as I completed my checklist. I periodically found myself unsure about. After overreacting, I would play again the audio recording of my father's disdainful remarks, which she has been a burden from the beginning, and one afternoon my determination would solidify once more. I discovered a letter my grandmother had written to me while going through a box of her documents that I had saved, but, my dearest Emma, it was dated just 1 month before she passed away and was allegedly never mailed. As your parents have always expected, I wanted to let you know why I have made the choices I make regarding my estate. Items to be given to them when they sought to borrow funds for different projects that I've seen throughout the years. Waste every chance without developing or learning, yet you've worked hard for everything, my dear child. Have you realized the importance of hard work and money? I'm leaving you my home because I'm confident you'll take care of it, respect it, and utilize it as a springboard rather than a crutch to achieve your own goals. I'm really proud of the woman you've become. To escape responsibility, never doubt that you deserve everything nice that comes your way. As I read her remarks, tears fell down my cheeks. It seemed as though she had somehow anticipated exactly what would occur and was extending time to fortify my determination. The following day I made arrangements for a storage facility in my parents' names and called a moving company to come out the next week. Made sure the information would be mailed to them and paid 6 months in advance. I updated my planning document every night, marking off tasks that were finished and adding new information as it came up. During the day, I was working coldly efficiently, but at night. One evening, when I was by myself in what had been my haven, I frequently broke down because when I was packing up family pictures, I saw a picture of me as a young child sitting at a fair. My little hands were firmly grasping my father's shoulders as we laughed together. I recalled that day when he bought me the stuffed animal and cotton candy for my legs. He had won by smashing milk bottles, and for a few seconds, I considered canceling the entire plan, but then I heard his voice and realized that she had been a burden from the beginning. By the end of the 3rd week, Marcus had brought through other boxes, and the picture was placed inside the one marked parents' items. 2 prospective buyers submitted bids that were both below asking, but I accepted the bigger offer because it was within the range we had agreed. Won $915,000 from a business leader moving to the region who may swiftly close the. Everything was coming together, and the deal would close in a little more than 2 weeks. 3 days later, parents would return from Europe, and the morning of. I woke up with an odd feeling of tranquility after the last several weeks. After going through phases of grief, wrath, doubt, and resolve, I felt focused today. I was well dressed in a sharp blue suit, confident in the armor I need for what would be one of the most important days of my life. The title's closure was set for 10 a.m. I came at the company's office at 9:45 with a little portfolio that contained the. Marcus was already there talking to the title agent about the few paperwork I still needed, and he gave me a positive. He asked softly, and I nodded more than prepared, grinning as I walked up. At precisely 10 o'clock, Richard Thompson, the executive, and his team of buyers arrived. Catherine, the wife, looked amiable enough and enthusiastic about the house and the neighborhood under various conditions. I could have told tales about the lovely property. The way the light came into the kitchen this morning from the magnolia tree my grandma planted, I just wanted to get. The procedure was shockingly unimpressive throughout the paperwork: sign here, initial there, sign again with. With each signature, I was guaranteeing my independence and cutting a tie at the same time. At last, the title agent slipped the $19,500 check across the table. I was relieved when the outstanding mortgage and closing charges were subtracted from zero. With trembling hands, the agent congratulated everyone and wished them luck. Marcus met me outside in the parking lot and asked, "Are you okay?" I managed a tiny grin as I answered, "Thank you," seeing sincere worry in his eyes. "Thank you so much, Marcus. Without your assistance, I couldn't have completed this." Replied that I'm still interested in the background of everything. Perhaps I'll tell you someday, but for now I already had movers to meet when the moving company arrived at precisely noon. Packed the most of my personal stuff with clear labels and kept them apart from my parents' belongings, which I watched over while they placed my baggage and furniture boxes onto their vehicle and drove off to my new. Although they had different destination tags, my parents' items in the interim flat were handled with the same level of care. Everything was inventoried, photographed, and loaded onto a different truck that was driven by. I had made arrangements for the payment details and access credentials for the storage facility I had booked in their names to be. While the movers worked, I went through every room of the house to make sure everything was in order and mailed to them at their current hotel in Europe. Drawers and closets to make sure nothing in my parents' room was missed. Discovered a tiny box concealed in the rear of their closet. My curiosity won out and I opened it to reveal letters. I shouldn't have read the dozens of them that my parents and grandmother had given me over the years, but I couldn't resist. They described years of monetary demands, deceptive practices, and In one letter, the grandmother expressed her increasing disenchantment with her son and daughter-in-law Robert. This is the last time I will offer financial support without a defined payback schedule. Your persistent demands are putting a burden on our relationship, and I'm concerned about the example you're giving Emma, who dated only a year before she passed away. I'm really worried about your assumption that you'll one day own my house because I've worked hard for everything I have. I urge you start saving for your own retirement since I want to give my possessions to those who will value and protect them. I carefully changed the letters in the box and added it to the things for plans that don't affect my land storage, but my grandmother's choice to leave me the house she had seen through gave me a new sense of connection. By late afternoon, both trucks were loaded, and my parents had arrived well before I did. My footsteps reverberated on the wooden flooring as I stood in the deserted house. Without pictures, without furnishings, and without the cumulative record of lives spent. It was merely a structure behind these walls, once more exquisite and expensive, but no longer mine. I made one last trip through every area, starting in the kitchenware. In the living room, my grandma and I had made cookies while watching old. She showed me the names of flowers and how to watch movies in the garden. I'm not sure if I was speaking to my grandma or the house when I whispered, to nurture growing things. I hope you understand. Ultimately, I put the message I had written on the granite worktop in the. I did this in the kitchen, where it would be impossible to overlook a surprise or burden. After taking one final glance around, I locked the front door behind me and left. Got into my car, slipped the keys in the mail slot, and drove off without turning around as I joined onto the. I experienced an unexpected sense of freedom as I drove toward my new temporary residence. Perhaps for the first time in my life, I was making a decision entirely on my own, free from any obligations to my family. Despite the intense desire for acceptance, the weight had been relieved not from my parents but from my short-term. The apartment wasn't particularly noteworthy. It was a furnished one-bedroom with all the amenities in a contemporary development. Never used, yet it was mine, with no expectations, no history, and most. The first several days went by in a haze of practical work, but most significantly, no one told me I didn't deserve to be there. Unpacked the necessities and configured my new laptop with improved security. And informed my workplace that I would be taking a 2-week vacation starting right now, without providing. Merely that by the end of the first week I needed some alone time. Created a sort of morning coffee routine on the tiny terrace with a view of. Afternoons spent looking for possible relocation locations around a man-made pond. In order to calm my mind after endless evenings of takeout and pointless TV, I looked through my old mails and. My parents only left voicemails once a day, never answering, but they were still having fun with the final days of their European journey, totally oblivious to the fact that their lives were. My phone rang with a text from an unknown number just as things were about to drastically shift, and my heart leaped before I understood. Even though it was only a delivery notification, it nonetheless made me conscious of the anxious condition I was in as I waited. To divert my attention from the impending explosion when my folks got home. I contacted my college friend Megan Lancaster, with whom I had lost contact due to the fact that my parents had never. Because of her crazy lifestyle, which mostly consisted of going to concerts and dating occasionally, Emma Davis is that. When I called, she said, "Really you? It's been like 3 years." That I acknowledged I've been busy. I suppose I'm still attempting to please the. For what seemed like the first time in weeks, her candor made me laugh at unpleasant parents. I'm phoning. We had pasta for dinner that evening at a restaurant midway between our sites since I had finally given up trying. With wine, I filled her in on the inheritance and the conversation I overheard. When I finalized the house sale, she commented, "Holy Emma, my disappearing act. That is both the worst and the most fierce thing I have ever heard." I'm still unsure about whether or not I made the correct admission. Are you serious? We're about to force you to leave your home, which your grandmother had left you expressly, and they called you a hardship while renting your house and making you pay for their trip to Europe, if you were. Her validation relaxed since the storage unit arrangement was too pleasant. Something constricted in my chest. Perhaps I wasn't exaggerating, perhaps this was the proper reaction to years of. So, I made an appointment with Dr. Sarah, a therapist, the next day. The following week, Palmer, who specialized in family trauma, had a vacancy. 10 days after the recent betrayal, it's time to talk about the lifetime of conditional love that came before it. My old phone burst with notifications, texts, and voicemails during the house closing. My parents sent me all of these emails after returning from Europe and learning about the reality. The initial voicemail said, "Emma, what the devil is happening? We just arrived home, and call us right away if our key doesn't work." My father's voice sounded more irritated than. An hour later, Emma Marie Davis was worried. "This isn't funny. Where are you?" He sounded irate the third time. "So why is the house empty? Call us now. We are terribly concerned about you, my mother Emma, sweetheart. Please give us a call as soon as possible." The faint care she had honed was evident in her voice as she said, "As you get this, we just want to know you're safe." The texts also become more complex with time, going from misunderstanding to demands to. The last message, which was placed at around midnight, contained threats to fabricate anxiety. "Discovered your note. I'm not sure what you believe you heard, but you've made a grave error. This is also our house. You really did it this time, even though you had no authority to sell it. We're speaking with an attorney first thing tomorrow." Emma, I saved every message, but I didn't reply to any of them. I also didn't allow them speak with any lawyers they desired. They arrived at my real estate agency the following morning, as promised, and sold the house that had been mine. My coworker Jamie texted me your parents, which was exactly the scene I had been expecting. When they refused to leave everything, the supervisor told them you were on vacation and showed them the door. "Are you creating hell?" "All right," I replied with a straightforward family issue that I will elaborate on when I return. I appreciate the heads up. However, later that day, my supervisor phoned me personally. "Emma, I am aware of your family's situation, but they made some very serious charges against you today." I inhaled deeply and realized that I was selling their house illegally, but it wasn't their house. My grandma left me mine, and I've been letting them stay there, but I have learned that they intended to coerce me into signing it to them, so yes, I did sell my house, which was, well, within my legal rights. I apologize for bringing this drama to work. She paused before answering. "Look, they've been barred from the property. Take as much time as you need," and her straightforward acceptance was another relief from the burden I had been carrying. "Please let me know if there is anything we can do." Professional repercussions, but it seems that I had more help than I had thought during the. My parents contacted mutual acquaintances in an attempt to contact me throughout the course of the following few days. My college alumni group and even distant relatives are making more efforts. Defended my choice to break off contact with them 2 weeks following their return, saying that they somehow wrote a long note after obtaining my new email address, most likely from a kind but unsophisticated former neighbor, presenting their account of what happened, claiming that I had misinterpreted a private conversation and overreacted radically and deceived my family in the most cruel manner imaginable. Would be prepared to pardon me if I used the money from the sale of the house to purchase a new property in order to set things right. That we could all live there together. Even today, the audacity seemed nearly astounding. I didn't reply because they were still attempting to control me. Instead, I sent the email to Patricia, my lawyer, who reaffirmed that I had operated entirely within the bounds of the law and suggested that I keep my distance as the weeks went by, and I went back to work and immersed myself into my real estate business while I started to rebuild my business and kept up my weekly counseling appointments. I discovered a beautiful condo too. One evening, I made a purchase in my new city that was smaller than my grandmother's house but entirely mine in every manner. I found an old photo album while organizing books on my new shelf. There were photos of family trips, holiday get-togethers, birthday celebrations, and other occasions that I hadn't opened in years. That had previously been joyful but now felt empty in light of what was hidden underneath the bright exteriors. I closed the album and store it in a closet. Maybe I'll be ready to revisit those memories at some point, but for now, I was concentrating On making new memories free from the weight I'd carried my entire life, memories marred by conditional love and manipulation. I was finally free of the intense need to win my parents' approval, and I was lighter than I had ever been. I modified my routines and went shopping at different stores to avoid my parents for almost 3 months. Shops and became quite aware of my surroundings, although I was aware of a confrontation. Was unavoidable, but how it would transpire surprised me. Rachel Chin. I thought you should know that I received a call from a former neighbor on a Tuesday afternoon, Emma. When your parents returned to the house, my heart skipped a beat. What do you mean by the house? It's no longer their home. Understand what Rachel said, but they're currently sitting in their car outside, gazing at it. The new owners are. They may not be aware yet because I'm gone on business, but I thought you would want to know that I thanked her and called the new owner, Richard Thompson, right away to warn him that while he was worried, he was thankful for the warning and promised to notify his. Later that night, my phone rang with an unknown number from a security business. In spite of my better judgment, I replied, Emma. My father's voice was strained. We need to meet tomorrow at the coffee shop on Maple Street, he said in a controlled rage. If you do not appear at 10 a.m., we will return to your workplace, but this time, we won't go quietly. He hung up before I could answer, so I contacted Patricia. They're threatening to cause a commotion at my place of employment right away, so you don't have to meet them there. She only reminded me that these threats may be used to obtain a restraining order. I thought about it, but in the end, I opted against it since I believe I need to confront them, but I preferred to do it on my terms rather than theirs. The following morning, I arrived at exactly 10:15 a.m., the well-known downtown coffee shop Daily Grind is late enough to get my point over without their leaving too late. I had picked this spot since it was public, constantly bustling, and I recognized my parents right away since the owner was a client of mine who I knew would support me if things became bad. My mother's face was sketched naturally and flawlessly while she sat at a corner table. With his hair groomed and looking a little unkempt, my father's jaw was fixed in that same hard line that had always. I casually approached their table while wearing my best business-like attire, which included another suit of. I purposefully used their first names when I welcomed them, Armour Robert Diana, rather than my mother's and father's. My father's face darkened even more as I trembled and he ordered me to sit down. I'm not. I felt it would be time to clear the air, so I agreed to meet you when you said, I'm here to take orders, but this. I sat down across from them, and we had a chat on equal terms or not. Is it really necessary for me to put my phone on the table between us? My mother remarked, pointing to. Given our past, I did say that I record all significant business discussions over the phone. We are your parents now. And even though it wasn't a business meeting, my father yelled at you. Threatened to fire me from my job if I didn't follow your instructions, which seems more like blackmail than raising my. They were surprised by my directness because they were accustomed to my caving in and pursuing peace at all costs. My father finally exclaimed, You stole our home, and it was unforgivable what you did. Never your house. To which I replied, It was my home. I kindly let you. Living in a reality that you seemingly viewed as a hardship caused my mother's eyes to enlarge. Do you mean that when I hit play on my phone, their voices filled the room between us? She has been a burden. Since the beginning, she has spent years paying for college, and now she has. She believes she deserves this priceless property that simply fell into her lap. I paused the camera and looked up to see my father flushed and my mother pale. What has she ever done? Rage, you secretly taped us, which is against the law, he sputtered. Since you called me and didn't hang up, it's against the law to record a discussion in which you participate, which I did. Appropriately, but that's not important. What matters is that I finally heard what you. Really, you misinterpreted me. My mother interrupted right away, and we were both exhausted. I postponed a costly European vacation that I had paid for because I was anxious about money. Please don't disparage my intelligence by deceiving me once more, causing you to sell the house out from under us, as my father requested, leaving us without a place to live. I sold my house as a form of retaliation after realizing it would never really be mine as long as you were there. You don't have a place to live, and you have the money your grandmother left you. Wait, you spent that. Instead of establishing your own house, my father pushed forward and spoke in a menacing whisper about a new car. Since we've lived there for years and have rights, you know we could see you for this. Actually, you don't, I said coolly, and I spoke with a lawyer before creating any rulings. You paid no rent, and you had no legal right to the land. Your names weren't on the deed, and you didn't contribute to any expenses, but feel free to spend whatever money you have abandoned an unwinnable lawsuit. My mother started to cry those old. This time, I felt nothing, unlike the sobs that had so frequently coerced me into complying. However, Emma questioned through tears, "What do you want from us?" with a detached sense of pity. "Okay, we're sorry if you misheard what you heard, and if I did," I repeated it incredulously. "That isn't an apology, it's just more manipulation, which is why I decided to center myself by taking a deep breath before moving on. Simply put, I want you to recognize what you did, not simply I overheard a talk, but after years of treating me like an investment that required dividend payments, I want you to recognize that your actions have repercussions, and I want you to abide by the limits I've set." Which my father specifically asked in a cold voice, and I won't be delivering. "If you need any financial assistance in the future, I won't provide you my new address. Instead, I'll speak with you only if and when I decide to, and if you continue to visit my place of employment or otherwise harass me, I will take legal action. That's it, you're just cutting us off after everything we've done for you." My mother's voice suddenly became louder after I corrected her for everything you did to me, and yeah, unless and until you can show sincere regret and make amends. This is where my father was. His chair abruptly began to scrape loudly across the floor, "And you ungrateful little." My mother took Robert's arm, and a number of other customers turned to gaze at He sat down at the table again, fuming. "You think you're so much better than us now? With your real estate profession and your prestigious schooling, but I can assure you that you wouldn't have any of it if you're true. I said that if we hadn't raised you, I wouldn't be who I am now," shocking them both. "I wouldn't be here today without your deceptive remarks, conditional displays of affection, and every time you made me feel I felt inadequate since everything I experienced taught me exactly the type of person I didn't want to be, therefore in a sense I should thank you." My mother's tears had dried up and had been replaced by a look of shock. My father appeared to have been slapped, so I got up and gathered my phone and pocketbook. "Your possessions are in a storage facility for which I have paid for 6 months. Was delivered to your hotel in Paris, but if you need the information again, I can text it to you. That's all you have to say to us?" my mother inquired in a quiet voice, and I stopped, staring at them both, possibly for the first time, truly examining them not as the imposing authority figures of my youth or the forces of manipulation throughout my adult life, but also two incredibly flawed individuals who had. I finally responded, "I hope you find peace, whatever it is, since I never learned how to love unconditionally. I won't be your collateral damage, but you're searching for something that makes you abuse your loved ones the way you do." I felt thousands of eyes on my back as I went away, but I stood. Taking a big breath of the cool autumn air, I stood up straighter than I have in years. Something unexpected washed over me, and it wasn't agony or fury. It wasn't even contentment. 6 months after the altercation at the coffee business, I had bought a wonderful coffee shop and was completely comfortable in my new life. Townhouse in Richmond, around 2 hours away from where I used to live, and had moved to. The change of environment at our company's office there had been just what I needed, close enough to keep important professional relationships, but I was still able to start again in my new house, which was uniquely mine in a way. Grandmother's house had never quite been finished, so I completely furnished it to my preferences, making it contemporary yet cozy. No antiques, no relatives, but bursts of color that made even the gloomiest days brighter. Nothing from the past weighed on my career, which was flourishing with the new beginning. Renewed my interest in real estate, and I discovered that I was especially drawn to assisting first-time homebuyers in navigating the challenging procedure. There was a very fulfilling aspect of helping others navigate one of the most important purchases of their lives, making sure they comprehended all of the agreements, rights, and documents they had. One young couple told me after closing on their first house that you presented things differently than other realtors, like, "You truly want us to comprehend, not just the symbol. Everyone should be aware." Precisely what they're agreeing to, I responded, considering how my own life might have turned out if I'd. My treatment appointments with Dr. Palmer continued even after I became aware of the manipulation earlier, but we had decreased Our work has changed from the acute trauma of my life to twice a month. You brought up our parents' violation of the underlying patterns that had characterized our relationship for decades. It's noteworthy that during one session, Dr. Palmer mentioned that you still occasionally feel bad about overreacting. I'd want to delve a little deeper into what your folks stated. I occasionally moved uneasily in my seat. I questioned whether I ought to have challenged them first and given them an opportunity to clarify before acting so forcefully. Do you believe they would have denied it or claimed I misunderstood if you had given this any thought? That they didn't mean it and were simply worn out and anxious, and would any of those justifications have altered the basic reality of what you heard? No, I acknowledged that it would have only allowed them to take advantage of me once more. Dr. Palmer nodded. Emma, tell me about your relationship with your parents. Employing resources and money as instruments of control and manipulation is known as financial abuse, and it's very pernicious since it frequently passes as parental or familial support. The phrase financial abuse struck me like a physical blow because I had never thought of using it while watching out for their child. Named to my circumstances, but as soon as she uttered it, I realized it was true. The same way they tricked you into paying for their trip, they intend to coerce you into handing over your house. These are all examples of financial abuse, as was the way they made you feel bad about your grandma abandoning you. She went on, saying that the proper answer to any abuse is to provide protection. Yourself, which is precisely what you did. That day, something changed within me. After that session, the last remnant of my residual guilt vanished and was replaced by clarity. I was shocked to see how widespread financial abuse was when I started doing serious research on it, especially within families and the dearth of resources available to assist individuals in identifying and resolving it. And concepts started to take shape, and as I read more articles, it got stronger. After reading each personal narrative online for 2 weeks, I went to my manager with a suggestion. I would like to set up a class where I would explain something to first-time homebuyers, particularly women, regarding identifying and stopping financial deception in significant purchases made by my supervisor, Vanessa Martinez. Listen carefully as I explain my idea, and I came to the conclusion that it's not simply about real estate transactions. About giving people the freedom to make financial decisions on their own, free from familial pressure or manipulation. Vanessa stated, I think it's fantastic when partners or even unscrupulous professionals. I completed on time, and we've all witnessed clients being coerced into choices they later come to regret. If we can position being the organization that genuinely informs and promotes our clients' financial independence, which is a potent market differentiator. With her approval, I started creating resources for the workshop, which began as a straightforward presentation and swiftly developed into an extensive program covering subjects. I dubbed it anything from identifying deceptive methods to setting up sound financial boundaries. Laying the groundwork for financial independence in important life decisions, we provided the first workshop on a Saturday morning with maybe a dozen people in attendance. There were 30 attendees, and the response was tremendous. People told tales of partners who had weakened their finances and parents who had pushed them into unwise ventures. Confidence pals who had tricked them into taking out unsuitable loans. For every tale connected with my personal experience, strengthening my belief that this job was necessary. Following the third successful, I was requested to do an interview with a local women's magazine regarding the program. Even more attention was drawn to the article Financial Freedom, Emma Davis's Crusade to Abolish Financial Exploitation. Despite the problem, I was able to reconnect with Aunt Judith, my grandmother's sister, through this expanding network. She contacted me after reading the magazine article. Emma, your grandmother would be that she hadn't seen since the burial. Really pleased of what you're accomplishing. She informed me after lunch that Elizabeth and your father had comparable difficulties throughout. Like his father, he always assumed that everything would be handed to him throughout his life. I confess that Grandma never really discussed that with me before he did. Aunt Judith mentioned that although she kept family problems secret, she recognized a lot of herself in you, your independence, and your career. She knew you would use the house as a foundation rather than a crutch, which is why she left it to you rather than Robert. Confirmed what I had already started to believe my grandmother had done, echoing the letter I had discovered while packing. Her choice with open eyes and a complete understanding of its consequences. Have you spoken to your parents at all? Aunt Judith recently inquired, not since our confrontation, to which I replied, I've got a few emails, but nothing that indicates they've accepted responsibility or truly thought about their actions. Sadly, she nodded for it. Robert has never been good at taking responsibility for his actions. Nothing was ever his fault, not even as a youngster. I'm sorry, Emma, you deserved better. I said, I'm making peace with it, parents, and was shocked to learn that it was real. Cannot alter their character or the way they treated me, but I can use that experience to better myself and others. Life for myself, so I took the day off work and went for a drive on the 1-year anniversary of selling my grandmother's house. I took a bouquet of her favorite flowers, pink pays, to the cemetery where she was laid to rest and sat next to her headstone. I believe I've now grasped what you were attempting to teach me. I mentioned quietly about having confidence and standing on my own story about realizing that love has too many requirements that I wish we had more time with you, but I appreciate each lesson you taught me when I sat there. Thought about how much had changed in a year, how the original hurt and betrayal had progressively morphed into something. Otherwise, I would accept my parents for who they were, not quite forgiving them. Their actions demonstrated their shortcomings rather than my value or the actual weight I had carried. Wasn't being their daughter, rather, it was the tiresome endeavor of attempting to win their affection, which ought to have been freely given. Putting those expectations aside, I discovered a freedom I had never experienced before. For supper tonight, my phone might have buzzed with a text from Megan. The entire group is thrilled to see you, and I grinned as I said yes. The gang consisted of people I had reconnected with or met in the past year who embraced me for who I was, the one who contributed without recording their score and who encouraged without monitoring this. What true connections were like, and this was what I had always earned while driving. When I got home, I remembered the message I had left at the deserted house. To my surprise, a burden did. I had intended this to be a sour reclamation of the term my father at the time used to hurt me. However, after a year, I noticed that occasionally the demands we put on ourselves to be flawless and accommodating are the biggest weights we bear. Accomplished enough to obtain the affection that ought to be our natural inheritance, releasing that load was the most. That night, in the company of people who had become my adopted family, I lifted a glass in a liberating gesture of my life. To my grandmother, a special toast to my journey, to the lady I was still growing into, unburdened and uncompromised. Ultimately, are you free? Have you ever had to make a tough choice to defend yourself against those who were supposed to love you? Setting boundaries with family can occasionally be the most difficult. I'd love to hear your opinions in that. If my story touched you, please leave a comment below, like, subscribe, and share. I appreciate you listening to my message to someone who might need to hear that it's acceptable to put their personal health first. Travel.